You are listening to the voice of Kurdish American Radio for democracy, peace, and freedom.
On Tuesday, February 23rd, Dr. Ralph Fertig, a 79-year-old civil rights activist lawyer, will face the Supreme Court in a case that questions the very constitutionality of the United States Patriot Act. On Wednesday, February 17, I sat down with Dr. Fertig himself to find out more about this upcoming case and how his activism for the Kurds has ended up in the Supreme Court. Dr. Fertig, what do you expect from human rights and peace organizations and Kurdish community here in the United States?
I have no expectations. I have hope. I have hope. I think four of the justices, the Chief Justice Roberts, Alito, and Scalia, and Thomas, will vote against me because they've been very conservative, and I think they will want to deny me the right of free speech. I'm hopeful that my lawyer will convince them, but I don't have much expectation there. I hope that four other justices, and Breyer, Sotomayor, right, the swing vote is Anthony Kennedy. Anthony Kennedy ruled recently, he wrote the opinion in a case that gave corporations free speech rights, which some people think was a terrible decision because a corporation is not a person. A corporation protects people against liability and has immortality, but in exchange for that it gives up its personhood. But he thought that it should have free speech rights. So if he is consistent, he may think that I, as a person, have free speech rights also. And if he votes that way, it will be 5-4 to allow me to continue to work for the freedom of the Kurds, including the American Civil Liberties Union and Human Rights Watch, and a number of other international human rights groups that have filed friend of the court briefs in support of me. But I don't think that that's going to influence the Supreme Court very much. I think they'll listen to the facts and interpret the law as is their want. It's a shame the court we now have decides most of the important cases 5-4. It's just a swing vote of one person that defines the law and defines the rights for all Americans. There was an earlier time during the Warren Court and the Berger Court when there was more unanimity on the court, when the justices deliberated and went through things and examined and reached a unanimous decision on important cases, very important cases, like the anti-segregation cases and voting rights cases. But today there's not that commitment. Today we have activist judges on both sides trying to insert political ideology into the opinions that govern our country, rather than looking at the transcendent qualities of justice. I think I have very little expectation. I feel sad because I love this country and I love the principle of an independent judiciary. But I don't think the judiciary is that independent any longer. I think it's at least 4, if not 5 of the justices are the captives of special interests. At least in their thinking they are. What can people do? Not very much. They can try to bring the issue to public attention. They could come to the court, although it'll be hard to get in because it'll be limited seating and I think there'll be a long line to get in. They can march out in front with picket signs explaining the issue and the crucial aspect of this case. They could tell their friends, their neighbors. They could try to get the story into the media because it's an important story. If a Supreme Court does not grant me the right to speak out for nonviolence and for peace in a conflict situation involving the Kurds, that means that they can abridge the freedom to speak for all Americans on a flimsy pretext. In a way, it's much more dangerous than what happened during the McCarthy period. We talk about McCarthyism when persons were denounced as sympathetic to communism, or in fact even being communists. They were denounced, they lost their jobs, they lost their friends, but they weren't put in jail. They could still speak out, they still had the freedom to speak out. This law, if it's enforced the way I'm afraid it may be, denies the right to speak out, and we put people in jail for speaking out if we have differences with the federal government. I mean, the Secretary of State can name any group as terrorist. In fact, there are legitimate terrorist groups that have not been named as terrorists. And there are groups that they call terrorists that are not really terrorists. It's a very political act, and it's very destructive. And that's the conservative four that I mentioned before: Roberts, Alito, Scalia, and Thomas.
Dr. Fertig, how effective can be public action for court's decision?
I don't know if it will affect the opinions the court's going to make, but I do know that the members of the court do read the newspapers. The hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, February 23rd. What happens after that is the justices meet privately, it's all very confidential, and they cast an informal vote. And the person to write the opinion is selected. If there's a majority, from that majority, the Chief Justice appoints somebody to write the opinion. But that opinion is a draft, and it's circulated among the other judges. And people can change their minds, they can change their vote, they can write dissenting opinions, they can write concurring opinions. So it'll take months before they shape up and they finally come out with a final decision. During those months, these are justices who read the newspapers also. And they could be influenced if persons point out the oppression of the Kurds, and if they engage in nonviolent action, to show that it's an effective tool, an effective technique that was used by Mahatma Gandhi, was used by Martin Luther King, was used by people in the Philippine Islands against dictator Ferdinand Marcos. It's been used very successfully and effectively. And if people engage in nonviolent protest, that might strengthen the resolve of justices who are on the fence or are unacquainted with the issue. So I would urge people to go forth with nonviolent protests, both in this country and in Kurdistan.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your comments.
You are listening to the voice of Kurdish American Radio for democracy, peace, and freedom.